Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, Chain of Command Part 1. Yeah, it's a two-parter. I'm telling you that ahead of time. If they're a two-parter, we're a two-parter. Chain of Command Part 2. It's All Been Checked Before. You know what? Don't miss it. No, Part 1. Yes. See, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was so excited to tell you about Patreon.com. Become a Patreon member. Support us. Keep this thing going. Make it grow. Get the bonus stuff. You know, that way, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, prequel, you're going to get it all. Become a Patreon member, patreon.com/IABD. Not only do you get all the It's All Been Checked stuff, you get all the It's All Been Done Before content. I can tell you, I'm a Patreon member, and I love getting all that content because I'm here for all this stuff. You be here for all this stuff. Chain of Command Part 1, It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. We are here to talk Chain of Command Part 1. Just Part 1. If you've watched ahead and seen Part 2, put that out of your mind for now. First impressions of Part 1.
Eventually, I remembered having seen this for a few reasons here and there, but obviously a very long time ago. My first note was, that is a cold open.
Yeah.
It was a very, like, I don't know if they thought of it in this way when they were doing it. It was actually a very appropriate way to set the tone. It's the quickest one I think I've ever seen. It was just like
43 seconds.
We're out, we're going.
Yeah.
And just I found it hilarious when they had Riker's expression when the Admiral was sort of like, you can leave now. Just immediately, just kind of like, okay, all right, and then just another way to set the tone for the. It's just the ringer. So yeah.
I wrote down relieve what now? Because it was you're relieving your command. What's that? I sorry. I just, roll the credits. Yeah, we talk about this a lot with the cliffhangers that aren't necessarily Part 1 or Part 2, or at least they don't start off as a Part 1 or Part 2. Going in, I think knowing it was a Part 1, like I kind of like laid back, and not just because Chloe was laying next to me on the couch, but
you didn't feel like there was many stakes. Yeah,
so I was just kind of like, okay, when are we going to get there? But obviously. We just said we jumped in real fast. So I thought as a developmental episode, I thought it built a lot of really great things or interesting things, I should say. I don't know that I thought it hung the moon. I know, just
that's no moon.
And you know what? I won't go too deep into that till later because a lot of the things I read were more of they looked at it as a whole, both episodes. So I'll just stop right there. That first impression.
Yeah, we are treating these separately. We're reviewing them separately because they aired separately. And like last year, we did Unification Part 1 and 2 separately, even though it was a mid-season two-parter. I liked this a lot. I do think the beginning was overly, not rushed, because I liked how quick we dropped into it, but it was overly artificially mysterious. Like, let's create tension for the sake of creating tension instead of worrying about what makes sense for the story.
Get in, there's no time to explain, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the specifics here in a second, but I felt like they made some moves that did not feel realistic for the sake of just stringing the audience along and getting us hooked, which, it's a business. You do what you do. Writing, it's a style. I thought there were a lot of great moments in Part 1. I enjoyed this episode quite a bit. It definitely left me excited for Part 2. I don't think I've seen this two-parter, but I'm familiar with some of the aspects of the two-parter, especially Part 2, because it holds such a prominent place in next-gen lore mythology. And I definitely felt like, okay, now we're back to some good next-gen, though we had a little bit of a rough start to the season. The opening, as I mentioned, 43 seconds long, just long enough to relieve Picard of command, with no explanation whatsoever. When we get back, we get some exposition that really sets up Deep Space Nine. We've learned the Cardassians have withdrawn from the Bajoran sector. And so that's very important because Deep Space Nine is a Cardassian space station in the Bajoran sector that when they pull out, they give to Starfleet. So that's, I know the next gen or the DS9 pilot aired after this two-parter. It'll be the next episode we review after these two parts. So in 2 weeks, come back to hear our discussion on Emissary. But I thought it was very interesting. They chose to make, similar to how they have brought Spock in right before Star Trek 6 to kind of cross-promote. They really brought a Cardassian story right before the launch of DS9, I felt, to kind of cross-promote the two. captain, the chief medical officer, and the security chief have been reassigned. Again, no explanation, but they haven't left the ship, which is what's weird. And that's where I thought it bore just a little bit more of, reasonably, you would say they've been given another assignment. You wouldn't just say they've been relieved of command. Right. You know, you might not want to tell them what the assignment is. And the way they presented it was very permanent, whereas clearly these people were just being sent on a mission and assuming the mission went okay, which they knew was a big if, they'd come back to the jobs they had. And that's not how it was presented, and it was overly obtuse about that.
Yeah, don't you think everyone else on the ship was like, well, what are they really doing? What's really going on here? Yeah, I mean,
like, okay,
they bought it.
If it was just Picard and Beverly, if it was just Picard and Beverly, they're like, okay, those two were having an affair. Command found out. Right. They're sweeping it under the rug and reassigning them. Totally makes sense. Then you have Worf and you're like, I don't think this was like a poly situation. I don't understand what's going on.
You got to remember that the crew hasn't been watching the show. They're not smart like we are. As far as they're just like, what? I guess this is it. Well, they're gone. They're not like they can't see the plot armor.
Yeah, so. I guess if you're in the lower decks, you're like, did you hear what happened up there? Yeah. Oh, something said. Yeah, I guess I could see that.
And there was some lower decks person going, yeah, they must have finally listened to me about Worf being too hard on us, and now I did blah, 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 and runs his mouth, and then when Worf comes back, he's like, oh, never mind. That'd be a very lower decks episode there. Yeah. Jellicoe's assigned to the Enterprise because they've decided he's more qualified than Riker for the mission at hand, but Jellicoe already has a starship. Do they need the flagship to do this mission, or couldn't they just send Jellicoe's starship on this mission?
That was my overriding thing throughout this episode. Yeah, I had the same thought, Jimmy, because I thought, I appreciate the conflict that arises, and then I think you get into some interesting conversations, which ideally they will be interesting, about his style of command and everything. But yeah, I felt the same way. Like, I get the Godfather thing, Picard or Riker, they're not a wartime consigliere. But this guy, obviously, that's his thing, is fighting the Cardassians and wartime stuff. So, but I also had the same thought, was like, well, then why not keep that guy on a ship with the people that know his style, know how to react to and how he wants things. And do you really need the Enterprise for that?
So I will say the Cairo, which was his ship, was an Excelsior class vessel, and I always love seeing an Excelsior class on screen. But at this point, the Excelsior class model is 75 years old. So maybe they didn't think it was the best qualified ship. But then in that regard, that kind of begs the question of why not just give them the next Galaxy class ship that's coming up? Why do you need to take just the captain and put him on this other crew?
Both times when the Cairo was there and then broke off, I think they just used the exact same shot. The Cairo going off on its own. Yeah. So. Yeah,
I wonder if that wasn't a shot from another episode, because this isn't the first time we've seen an Excelsior class starship before.
I think you're right.
But I'm not complaining. I love seeing an Excelsior class. I don't know why, it just always tickles me. I guess the movies, it sticks in my mind so well. I appreciated seeing Picard running Worf and Crusher through the drills. I do think by that point he should have been able to give them a briefing instead of just saying, can't tell you anything, work your butts off for me. Right. I get in this situation, though, that they have enough loyalty to Picard, they're going to do it without question, and that's fine. I just wish you would have given him a little bit more information. I feel like he should have been able to.
I think we probably, all of us in any of the positions we've held in our professional life, can relate to the idea. There's always that kind of push-pull of, well, this new person, this new boss needs to adjust to us. Yeah, and the other way is, well, maybe you guys need to break out of what you've been doing and open yourself to new ideas, which is kind of what happened here for a couple episodes. Is Jellicoe the Bobs from Office Space? Is he a consultant, which we know he isn't, but this, to a point, I'm like, what would you say you do here, Riker?
So you're comparing it to corporate America. I felt the same as well. We've all had positions where a new manager comes in, and the good ones take time to learn how you do things before they make changes. Mm-hmm. The not so good ones immediately come in and make changes, or they think they've been endowed with some power, like, oh, you brought me in to make a change, so let me make changes.
Yeah.
That is not the situation here, because in corporate America, they do it because they're bringing in a new manager and they're hoping to change things to make more money, which is stupid. And I hate it. And I hate capitalism and I hate the whole structure. Sure. It makes me so angry when new managers come in and do that. And it makes me so angry that they expect all of us to be focused on profit every day, because I don't give a crap. I will do the job and get the paycheck, but I do not care. I'm not going to drink the Kool-Aid and be like, my goal in life is to make you more money.
Sorry, I'm getting. I've got some breaking news here. Yeah, this is Jimmy's job. He just got fired.
No, I did not get fired.
Just right here, my earpiece. They're letting me know. Fired. Yeah,
I work with some great people, and I actually like the job I have now. And I still am this down on capitalism and the system and whatever. But anyway. That's all beside the point. Jellicoe and Starfleet, they don't have those same missions. So when you take your flagship, which runs very successfully, with a crew that is honored for the way they've run, you don't bring in the new guy to just change things immediately. And again, this could have been handled so much better by Starfleet.
Didn't feel like he had studied really that much. He was just like, well, this is how I do it on my ship, so this is how you're going to do it on this ship. So
just so hot. And the familiarity, I didn't mind as much if he hadn't been a jerk. Coming in and calling everybody by their first names right off the bat just rubbed me the wrong way, because he had not earned that right. But at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, you want to have the respect and the back and forth, but
I'll tell you where I cut both ways was on the Troi thing, because on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, she should be allowed to cover up. From the aspect of the actress and all that stuff, I'm like, you know what, she should get to cover up. But as Fashionate So, my favorite Star Trek TNG blog on Tumblr, said, this is not the look for Deanna.
I disagree entirely. I really do.
All right.
I think... Wait, disagree with which part?
That this is not the look for Deanna. The way they presented the story was she liked wearing these alternate uniforms, and Jellicoe said no, which was kind of crap. You should not be able to go in and make that sweeping change, in my opinion. However,
it's not just that though. It's just there's really there's just that undertone they're going for. That's certainly much more obvious when this aired, and probably I don't know if you would say it's more or less so now, but just the idea of that kind of patriarchal
looking female is not professional.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So behind the scenes, I'm pretty sure Marina Sirtis had been asking to get out of those bodysuits and was thrilled to be in a uniform. And I'm also pretty sure they leave her in a uniform the rest of the series and into the films. And I actually like her better in a uniform. No, I just like the look of it better. I think Troi looks very sharp in a uniform. And I hope you get used to it, because those bodysuits are gone. They're over.
Oh, that's fine. Right. I mean, I look deep into Marina Sirtis' eyes any day. I don't mind.
I don't want to go too far away from this one bit, though. That's really kind of ironic if you think about it. I don't like the way that they went about doing that. Then it's sort of like,
and the fact that her character chooses to keep it, even though her character didn't want to make the change. I think my like of it is I think she looks good in that color. I like that blue bodysuit better than other bodysuits. I like the black and blue on her.
And actually, the Fashionate So writers did say that she had a particular aversion to high collars like that. She's like, I can't wear anything higher than a scoop neck. She's like, and I break out in hives. So that was also part of her reasoning on it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm what I'm trying to say is it feels like the actress behind the scenes is asking for a form of empowerment in a way. You know, she wants some sort of autonomy of not having to wear something skimpy, right? Was that the understanding there?
Yeah, I think she was never totally comfortable in the skin tight.
Yeah. So ironically, the character on screen is being dictated to in a way that is taking away her empowerment as well. So the change is being made in a way that almost kind of humiliates both of them. I don't know. It's almost like they're picking at her in a certain way, but it's like, I think what I'm saying is that I would have preferred it if somehow the on-screen character decided that she wanted to make the change for some other reason. Maybe it was professionalism or something, but not to make it seem like she's being shamed into it. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. So when I'm Googling this, maybe I don't know if this was ever addressed in canon following this two-parter, but it says that she found her official interactions with the crew became easier when wearing a uniform because she was the only one not wearing uniforms. So that made her feel like more of a part of the group, so they'd open up to her better. You do remember she wore a uniform in the pilot, but it was the short dress version of the uniform.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of the pants. But yeah.
Right.
So that was most of my fashion right there, along with the black jumpsuits that Picard and Crusher and Worf wore. And then they also got to wear casual clothes in one scene as well. That looks pretty good.
Fashion so folk lady. We both called it the cat burglar outfit, but we thought they were great cat burglar outfits. Obviously, look great on Crusher. They either look like cat burglars or a really pretentious theater troupe. So,
did you like the casual wear they wore in the deal with the Ferengi?
Yeah, he said it was impressive that Beverly was able to use her feminine wiles while wearing what looks like carpet from a movie theater.
I liked that outfit on her, so I'm a little bit offended there. But
yeah.
Anyway, that's the end of my fashion notes. So back to the story.
If we must.
Picard passes command to Jellicoe in like a super formal ceremony in 10 Forward, which is again awkward and weird, and makes Geordi think, okay, well, this is going to be a permanent change then. Which again, they had much reason to believe Picard wasn't coming home, which they were very clear about. But still, you keep the seat warm until you know whether he's coming home or not.
How did you get an invite to this 10 Forward ceremony? Like, who did you? Because it was a weird motley group of people.
It was,
and most of them seemed disinterested at best. Like, oh, I was just here to get a cocktail. What is this? Okay, are you done yet? Because I want to get another drink.
That was it. It was just the command staff and then whoever happened to be in the bar at the time.
I guess maybe it was meant to be awkward because it certainly was.
We did get that nice interaction between Troi and Beverly in that scene, though, where Troy's like giving her a look and she's like, I wish I could tell you.
I wanted that to be longer, but I think it passed the Bechdel test. We at least had that. I know it was short, but
it's just pleased to see any example of that friendship.
Yes, I agree with you.
Jellicoe clearly
go longer.
Jellicoe clearly knows Picard's mission and has been read in. Is that necessary? I mean, I know he has to be ready to rescue Picard, but should he have all the details if they're keeping this close to their vest?
Right.
It seems like an odd thing for him not to know, in my opinion. I just have a couple of notes about the tone of the episode. Mm-hmm. I think the things you were saying about the changing command and so forth, making the changes, whether I don't know how realistic that would be necessarily, but my thought was, well, first of all, this feels more serious than even the serious episodes we were getting before in TNG.
Uh-huh.
I would say. And secondly, it gave me the feeling like, as the audience, we'd been insulated from the military realities of Starfleet as a whole. It's hard to say like how representative this new captain is of the rest of the rest of the organization. Maybe everyone's but or like as Stephen is fond of saying, the wartime consigliere.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's just like a subset of people who are like that. I mean, we get touches of them sometimes in other episodes, but this is like there's like no protection from him. He's just there.
This takes me back to my second note, which is the Admirals Commodores suck. They always I mean, this is why Kirk was like, I don't like being an admiral. He's like, one, obviously, as he and Spock discussed in Star Trek 2, that's not his best purpose. It does not serve him well. And being an admiral means doing other things, and it seems like making bad decisions.
Well, it will probably make you feel better to know that Jellicoe will soon be promoted to admiral. Not on screen, not on screen, but in the novels. The Star Trek New Frontier book series that I've referenced before that pulls characters from Next Gen, the main admirals we get constantly in the New Frontier books are Admiral Jellicoe and Admiral Nechayev. From the two characters from this episode, and they are always like fighting over the orders, but they're both somehow always giving the orders to the main starship. And Jellicoe hates Captain Calhoun, and Nechayev loves him. So there's that dichotomy of the back and forth. And honestly, it's really fun when they're both admirals, and they're kind of like, and they respect each other a lot, and they're warring back and forth while still being good friends. Is a great dynamic. I love those novels.
By the way, I'm also contractually obligated to say Admiral. So I haven't got that in yet. with all this Admiral talk, I hadn't got one in yet, so I had to.
So do you not like Jellicoe as a character, or do you think he just didn't fit in the ship?
I actually am a huge Ronnie Cox fan, which I might be the first person to ever say that, but he's what my dad always called a great character actor. He's in Deliverance, he's in Beverly Hills Cop, and
Total Recall, RoboCop.
Yeah, RoboCop. Yeah.
More recently, did a few episodes of Nashville. Still active.
Yeah, and I thought he could have really leaned in harder and made even more of a caricature, but I don't think he did. I just think this is that guy. Again, I'll say it, wartime can see the area, whatever. This is how he operates, and I don't know that he was like, because I think they could have played him as like a villain, but obviously he and Riker didn't get along and stuff like that, and he rubbed some people wrong. But some people like Geordi and those guys, and I know I believe in next week's episode, but we're like, all right, yeah, we can do that. And Data's like, yeah, actually, that's achievable. Let's do this.
I don't think Geordi is one of those people. He was the one who was complaining to Riker.
Oh, but I thought Geordi came around.
You might be jumping in the next episode. I don't remember that part.
They at least got on board with his orders as time went on.
Right.
Whether they approved of them or not. So the thing is, I think his style clashed a lot, and he's not somebody I would want to work under, but the way he's presented is a very capable, respected captain. Right. And I do think if you went into the service under his command, you'd probably appreciate him a little more than if you've had a different experience and then been thrust under it.
Yes.
And I liked Ronnie Cox in his performance. I thought he was good, and I thought he towed a very careful line of not being somebody you despise, despite it. Yeah,
he's played that like real heavy villain and just leaned into it in some not so great movies in the early 80s as well. But I thought here he really, he like you said, he rode that line just enough.
I do see he was the chief in Cop Rock.
Oh, did not remember that.
I've never seen it, but he was in all 11 episodes.
So I think this significance of that line is that if you are able to take a step back and you hadn't been familiar with his crew or whatever, his instructions, I mean, they weren't necessarily unreasonable. I mean, you understand what he was saying and why. There was a logical reason why he was not getting along with some of the crew in that sense, but it's such a jarring shock from the family environment we're seeing in TNG that they built up to this point. I mean, there was a little bit of that in first season. It's really hard to remember now. I mean, the way that some of them got along, or rather, there's some of the tension, but it never rose to this level. Mm-hmm. Even though Picard was a little bit more rigid when he first began, when we were first starting to see them.
I would have one of my alternate episodes, and I have multiple alternate episodes, is what would it have been interesting if Picard had died during this two-parter and Jellicoe did take over as the permanent captain. I think there could be a compelling story of he and the crew learning how to work with one another. Mm-hmm. And I do think in that case, you got to keep Riker there and have them work through their issues. But that's just my opinion. I don't want to lose Patrick Stewart, but I would have liked to have seen a Captain Jellicoe story longer. I'm disappointed he only did these 2 episodes of Star Trek. I wanted more.
Yeah. Jellicoe, isn't that what the cats and cats are? Aren't they Jellicoe cats? Is that what they are?
Jellicoe.
Interesting note, the writer of this episode was a huge fan of Bill Cosby and named him Jellicoe as a tribute because Cosby was doing the Jello commercials at that time.
I can't tell if you seem so serious. By the time you were like maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the sentence, I was prepared to believe it. And just, oh my God. I was like, okay, seems reasonable. Bill Cosby, yeah.
Nope, lying. As far as I know, it could be true. As far as I know, it was a lie. The Jellicoe lays down the law in front of Picard in that 10 forward scene where he's like, we're going to do a 4-shift rotation. Riker's like, well, I was going to talk to you later, sir, but, they're all pushing back, and let's wait. He's like, no, you do it or else. And that had to be so awkward for Picard right there, right? Although I think the main thing they threw in early on to make us hate Jellicoe is he ordered the fish out of Picard's ready room. Goodbye, Dr. Livingston. They did try to humanize him, though, by letting him hang all of his son's drawings in the office.
Yeah.
Tried, but yeah.
Well, see, that's part of the thing. I thought they made this a fully developed character. It wasn't a 2-dimensional character, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and part of me thought, well, was it Rodney Cox? Rodney Cox. Ronnie Cox, too old to have like a 8-year-old, but he was only 56. So I mean, these days that's not too old.
And men can father children well into the later years.
Yeah, men don't care. Yeah.
Troi brings the concerns of the crew to him, and I was still frustrated that he didn't try to meet them halfway at all. Mm-hmm. But it also isn't that surprising that he orders her to take care of it and figure out how to get them on board, because that is kind of her job, right? I thought the most startling change, and this was part of his formality, is Data started to announce Captain on the bridge whenever Jellicoe entered the bridge, which is within regulations, but Picard told them to stop that. I'm pretty sure, maybe this is Manchurian, whatever, but I'm pretty sure Picard told them it wasn't necessary early in the series to say it every time. I don't remember.
I wrote down, get it done, lesser than, make it so.
Agreed.
And I actually almost wrote "get her done."
Larry the Cable Guy was a huge fan of Captain Jellicoe, and that's where he got his catchphrase.
And maybe that was just because I know Ronnie Cox's Southern accent, but I stopped short of that. But I feel like "get it done." I feel like that's another corporate thing too.
Yeah,
I think if my boss said "make it so," I'd be like, "All right, I'm on the Enterprise now." I mean, to a point. If they said it every day, then I'd be like, "You're overdoing it." But
Jellicoe would fit in better in corporate America than he does in a utopian future, for sure.
Yes.
And that's not a good thing.
No.
Riker goes to talk to Picard, and he leaves Picard alone because he's clearly exhausted and sore. I was already cringing at that conversation, and I'm really glad it didn't happen. Like, I understand why Riker might go to him to enlist his help, but going to the old boss and telling help with the new boss, and I did that once, so I'm not saying I'm better than that or anything, but it's never going to go well. It's never going to get you the result you want, and it's only going to make things uncomfortable. And Picard would have to uncomfortably tell Riker that's not my place, and that's how that conversation would have gone down, and I'm glad we didn't have to see that. But
it's interesting that he ended up doing it anyway. Like, he sort of maybe intuited what was happening and still sort of broached the subject with Jellicoe eventually.
Yeah, I mean, Picard could tell his officers were on edge, and Jellicoe's just like, hey, it's mine now. This isn't your ship anymore. And this would have been a very different episode if he was temporarily in command, which is what it should have been if he was in command at all.
And I think it gets that overriding issue of Jellicoe's like, well, get her done, get it done, and this is the way I do things, as opposed to, well, do you actually want to get the results that Starfleet wants here, or do you just want to get there the way you do it? And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but is that the most effective way? Which I think is my question throughout this episode, and which always drives me back to Commodores and Admirals suck at Starfleet.
Well, that brings an interesting point. I think this is a good place to talk about Vice Admiral Elena Nechayev. I'm probably saying it wrong. Played by Natalija Nogalic, who is best known for National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, where she played Mrs. Shirley, the boss's wife, Two Broke Girls, Hoffa, and this role. Because this role is not a 2-episode role for her, she actually will be in... in 3 more episodes of Next Gen. She's only in part 1 of this. For some reason, I thought she was in part 2. But after Chain of Command part 1, she's in 3 more episodes of Next Gen, and she's in 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine. And this is the only time she's a Vice Admiral, so apparently she gets a promotion before we see her the next 5 times. But how much of this is her fault for the way she handled the situation?
Yeah, I'll tip my hat. She's my most annoying of the episode, because I feel like she comes in and she's doing her posing, what was the impetus? What was the research of this? Because it reads like the Enterprise needed a shakeup. And again, it goes back to that question we asked earlier, Jimmy, which is, why not just take the Cairo? And if you need to retrofit the Cairo, those guys are already ready to go, because they already work under that system. They'd probably be all fired up, like, yeah, let's muscle up this ship, rather than really changing what the Enterprise's mission is to me, and what they're used to on their ship. I don't think that achieves your goal better. And again, I'm obviously not a military man, but in my mind, it would not. It just doesn't seem like it get you to achieving your goal. And but that again, I feel like admirals don't give a crap about that.
Well, I mean, I think I accepted well enough at the time the idea that the flagship is famous enough to have some sort of symbolic effect.
Yeah.
Whether the other changes were justified along with it, I'm not sure. What I was going to say before, what Jimmy was saying at the beginning, swayed me for some things because I wasn't really thinking clearly about some of it. I was just kind of along for the ride and kind of enjoying the new tone and some of the conflicts. But this would indeed have been better introduced in a different way. Something that was like a different reason for changing the command for a while, rather than there being some secret mission like this. I think mashing those two things together is what's been making this little,
Here's my solution to the problem, and this episode would have to be rewritten quite a bit. But to if I'm an admiral, you assign the Cairo and the Enterprise to work together. Riker takes temporary command of the Enterprise, but he's listening to Jellicoe because the two ships are patrolling together. Then you get the experience in the crew with the captain you want, and you get the gravitas of the Enterprise.
The way they describe the weapon reminded me of the neutron bomb, which I think is still a thing. But essentially, the neutron bomb, how it works is it doesn't blow up buildings; it just releases
neutrons.
Radiation.
Okay.
Yeah, radiation to kill people, but leaves the building standing. So it won't keep the atmosphere pristine, but it'll keep the And then I think ideally the radiation goes away. But speaking of half marathons, Picard mentions running. I haven't been this exhausted since I trained for the Academy marathon. Yeah. And at first I was like, what? And then I thought, because in my mind it was like, oh, everyone had to run it, but I imagine only certain people were up for running the Academy marathon. And I could totally see Picard as a marathoner with his bill. So
especially because he was arrogant and had to be the best at everything, as we've established.
Yes. Yeah.
So this episode was written by, it says story by Frank Abetamarco. Yeah. He was a producer on Next Gen for the first half of season 6, and then he's gone just like half a season. But before this, he wrote Man of the People, which we talked about. And then he has a story by credit for this, but a written by for part 2. And the written by for this goes to Ronald D. Moore. So 2 people involved with the show, which is probably why they work in so much continuity and backstory. I like that.
The other reason that Beverly was sent along was to use her feminine wiles to seduce.
Oh, man.
That brings us to the next scene, where they're trying to convince the Ferengi. Daimon Solok, played by Lou Wagner, who's best known for Planet of the Apes, the 60s version, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Airport, and this role, according to IMDb.
That's some good credits.
Most recent regular role, he did 8 episodes of Raising Hope, which was a sitcom I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. He will play a different character in an episode of Deep Space Nine, so he has 2 Trek appearances, but only one as Daimon. If you look at his picture on IMDb, he looks pretty familiar to me. He only has about 70 credits, but I feel like those 70, I've seen a decent number of them.
Yeah, that's the way I felt.
I liked that Worf did not intimidate him enough, so Beverly just had to suck it up and try to seduce him, even though that's not Beverly's thing.
Right.
And she's good at it. Yeah. It's just another thing.
Yeah, very good.
As they creep through the caves, Worf reacting to the bat was cracking me up.
Yeah.
And then he tries to throw the fear of heights back at Beverly, but it really doesn't feel like she's afraid of heights. It felt like I'm going to throw this back at you, and it landed like with a thud. Mm-hmm. Back on the Enterprise, Jellicoe is dealing with Gul Levick, played by John Durbin, best known for Return of the Living Dead, Litany for Mr. President, Heart and Souls, and again, this episode, according to this, he will play a separate character in an episode of DS9, a separate character in an episode of Voyager, and previously he was in the Next Gen episode Lonely Among Us, again, as a different character. So he does 4 different Trek roles. I hated that character, but I liked his performance. I thought he was...
Yeah.
The previous role he played was as one of like the lizard people, where the lizard and the dog people wanted to like kill each other.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the way that they were playing off each other. I love when you see people doing those psychological strategies and watching them try to play out and do the manipulation tactics when they're being portrayed well enough. Is it believable that it would have worked that way? Who knows? But I mean, I liked what they were going for and seeing what they were doing, and it was starting to sell the character of Jellicoe on me. as far as him being competent, but then also did it make me like him more? Yay bit, but I mean, yeah, I did like the opposite too of Troi and Riker discussing it too, and then also seeing the way that they just were still not necessarily warming to him, but cooperating with him in a certain way. The way they were framing him and creating those pictures in the room, I really enjoyed the way that worked.
I was gonna say them being impressed with him helped warm his character a lot. Mm-hmm. Although, and then the Troi comment where Riker's like, "Well, he's a loose cannon," and Troy's like, "No, he's not. He's not that confident." I love it.
Yeah, it was. He's. I'll say this for him: he's certainly sure of himself.
Yeah. There you go. And he's like, she's like, "No, he's not." And yeah, I appreciated that a lot. Good character development. At this point, Gol Lemek basically implies, "Yeah, we know what Picard's doing, and we know about this whole plot." And that, I mean, if you're an officer on the Enterprise, like Riker or Troi, any of them, you must feel totally helpless when you realize, like, oh crap, our captain it has been found out. He's in trouble, and we can't do anything to help him.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I'm definitely creeping in next week, but it definitely is that feeling of, well, we can't just do what we want to and beam him out this time. It's like this is a delicate situation.
The episode the scene in the episode that felt extraneous was when the cave-in kind of happens on top of Beverly, because it doesn't really matter to anything else.
Right.
But I did appreciate that Picard ran to help her, of course, because not only is he the captain, but it's Beverly. And then Worf pulls him back and digs instead, and Picard accepts that pullback. I liked that dynamic and interaction. Like, he's reasonable. He understands in this moment, let Worf do it.
Yeah.
And then, too late, it's a trap.
That's a trap.
Exactly. And Worf and Beverly get away, but Picard's trapped. And immediately I'm like, why aren't they chasing down Worf and Beverly? But that will become clear, and it makes sense why they just don't care and let them go. Mm-hmm. But at the time, it's like, whoa, dude. I get why they leave. I get when the door closes where Beverly's like, Worf, we gotta go, as much as she wants to stay.
Right.
But, and then we are introduced to Gol Madred, played by David Warner, returning hot off his role in Star Trek 5 and 6, right? Yeah. Chancellor Gorkin in Star Trek 6, and then he was the human ambassador in Star Trek 5. Also best known for Titanic, Tron. He's got 230 credits. He's just Admiral Boom in Mary Poppins Returns. He's just such a wonderful actor. It's so great to see him return. And the voice, immediately, you're like, oh, that's David Warner. I was glad that Star Trek convinced him to put on the loaf for a two-parter.
And I think I read that this was his favorite of the three.
Really?
Did you say
because he got to interact with Patrick Stewart so much. So, yeah, again, that's next week, but yeah.
I'm sorry,
the makeup job would have been annoying. Sorry.
Put on the loaf?
Yeah.
Is that the makeup you're saying?
Yeah, the number of people, and maybe this is just the other Star Trek podcast I listen to, but they refer to any of the prosthetics as loaf.
Huh. Never heard that before.
Oh, maybe it is specific to that podcast. I don't know. They talk about loaf a lot on that podcast. But yeah, the going through the makeup thing, I was like, oh, he's probably disappointed because he went from playing a human playing a Klingon, which I'm sure was a makeup job, to a Cardassian, which is a big makeup job. But I'm really glad he took it. And that whole thing where he's just introduced, he's like, well, Picard's going to prove an interesting challenge. And we learned that Picard was specifically interrogated. And then he basically tells Picard, if I'm not satisfied with your answers, you're going to die. And I appreciated all that. I liked, it was a brief interaction. It was a great setup. It was a great cliffhanger. I was totally on board. I just wanted a battle of wills between Gol Madred and Captain Picard. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but that's what we're going to get in part 2. So this episode gave me what I needed. It set up a part 2 that it actually delivered on, that I was excited. I mean,
they kind of had to. Well.
Not necessarily. We'll talk about that more next week, but frequently when the Next Gen does a 2-parter, the first part's so much better than the second part. And I would argue that is not going to be the case here, but we'll get to that next week.
How could you possibly know that?
I'm psychic. My other alternate episode I was going to do, though, is, and this will make more sense once you've seen the pilot of Deep Space Nine. The Cardassians really hate Sisko when he comes and takes over the station, for a good reason, because he just immediately rubs them the wrong way. But Cisco really hates Picard. And so it would be really fun if this was a specially targeted mission so they could throw him a party just to annoy Cisco. Be like, you're the enemy of our enemy, so let's celebrate you. Which, it may be a little jarring that we will next week or in 2 weeks be introduced to a captain that hates Picard justifiably, and that is going to be our lead character going forward. But I will tell you, his anger towards Picard is 100% justified, and I am on board for him.
I'm not sure I agree, but we'll see.
We'll talk about it when we review Emissary in 2 weeks, because the Picard-Cisco dynamic is immediately apparent in the pilot. I'm pretty sure Picard guest stars in the pilot. So,
well, I mean, I know what I'm just saying. I'm surprised it's coming up that soon. I don't want you to spoil too much more for Steven as far as the surprise.
My alternate episode is Picard's 11, so they just expand on the 3 of them, the cat burglar, and there's 8 others, and they're pulling a heist.
So the 8 others: Riker, Troi, Geordi, Data, Ro, O'Brien, Guinan, Keiko?
Barclay.
Oh, Barclay. Barclay instead of Keiko, because Keiko doesn't make sense for this job. Yeah. There we go. I like it.
We thought we knew what Commodoring was like. This one really felt like they just ratcheted everything up in a way that I hadn't seen yet, and so I appreciated that at least.
Well, let's get to the rankings then. Who was your annoyance of this episode? Steven already said Nechayev, the Admiral.
Admiral? Yep.
I mean, I'm going with Jellicoe. I don't know how you go with anybody else. Even though I was appreciating the layers of his character, and that by the end of the episode we had a little bit of complexity that made me appreciate him a little bit more. It's that corporate America mentality that I just hate so much and immediately rubs me the wrong way.
I remember at the top of the episode, I was jokingly thinking that it was going to be Jellicoe, or whoever was going to make the kind of like, well, this is going to be a tough decision, ha ha ha. But no, it is kind of hard to decide between the two in a way. I felt like we got more grating appearances from Jellicoe, though, so I think I'm going to stick with that. Even though some of the things, as I said, were justified when it backed off a bit, but...
Who are you having a drink with?
I'm having a drink with Jellicoe, actually. So maybe it's just because I like Ronnie Cox, but I was like, you know what? I'm interested to hear what this guy has to say about everything.
Interesting enough, I'm having a drink with Nechayev because I want to know why she handled this the way she handled it. That's a good
one, too. Same. Oddly, it's weird kind of flip thing. It's I actually really liked her the presence, the something about the mannerisms and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would be interested to know if things like what Jimmy was saying, but also just what her actual personality would be like. So,
where do you want to rank the episode? I'm gonna start at the top. Better or worse than Relics?
I remember while I was watching this episode, and some of it's the whole recency bias thing. And certainly because of the jump up in quality from some of the things we've been seeing in retrospect, I was really on board with like, oh my God, this is like the best one of the whatever. But it just, I think Jimmy might have talked me out of it as we were going through this, and you were making me think of some other things about some of the way things were being framed.
Interesting.
I was convinced. Yeah, I mean, at this point, it really would have been better without some of the setup. I don't know if it's enough to drop it below Relics necessarily, but it makes it a lot harder. I'd forgotten about that episode too, which also,
I'd go above Relics.
Huh. Yeah.
I guess. Like I said, I think this episode hung the moon, but I don't know that any of them so far this season have hung said moon.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can go with that.
Next week, Chain of Command Part 2, believe it or not. It's a little surprising to me that follows Chain of Command Part 1, but whatever. While the humorless Captain Jellicoe, according to IMDb, leads the effort to prevent a Cardassian invasion, Picard is captured and tortured by a ruthless interrogator in an attempt to break him. So until then, live long.
By not dying and talk.
What if you die hard? Live long and die hard? Is that one of those movies?
Live free. Not yet.
Yes, live free and die. Yeah.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?